Hello, welcome back to my podcast, Ukrainian Jenny Meets. Today you're going to watch a very special episode, I would rather say a film, and it's devoted to Kharkiv. The city suffers the most at the moment. Russia bombs it daily and kills its citizens. And it happens at the same time when the Western partners do not allow to use Western ammunition to attack Russian army on Russian territory. So this episode has several reasons why it's so special. These were my first steps towards this podcast. I knew I wanted to do something of my own, but I didn't know what exactly. So I bought a camera, bought some equipment, and went to Ukraine again, hoping to find some amazing stories and hoping to meet brave people. So I did. Second, I was filming it all by myself. So you won't see me on the picture, but I was the person who was holding the camera, asking questions and filming the location where I was taken to. And third, the person I met, Colonel VITO, he's a legend. He was sent to Kharkiv to organize the defense. He organized it, he was defending Kharkiv, and he also was one of those who established the Kraken regiment, the legendary one that we know it now. And the battle for Kharkiv has a very important historical meaning, because when defenders of Kiev region realized that Kharkiv didn't fall, Kharkiv wasn't occupied, they realized that actually the successful defense of Ukraine is possible and Ukraine will stand. So let's see what stories will Colonel VITO tell us and what places he will show us.
We formed the unit which later became the Kraken. Budanov sent us to the city of Kharkiv, and we received a combat assignment from him. Our task was to organize resistance. My colleague and I arrived in the city, prepared all our intelligence units, held a small meeting, and began to prepare for war. We clearly understood that war was inevitable. We had information about how the Russians would act, and now the time had come. On the 24th at 3 a.m, Budanov called and said, "The convoy's on the move." By about 4 a.m, we'd heard the first explosions in Kharkiv. Yuta and I, Yuta's my colleague, are the officers from the headquarters of the Ukrainian Defense Intelligence. We had to start the battle for Kharkiv.
Ми вижили всі, є, правда, 200 трохи, ну все нормально. Штаб оборони Харкова працює і буде працювати. Слава Україні!
Then, at 6 or 7 a.m, our first groups arrived, and we fully deployed in the positions we'd determined. Then, I left for the city and arrived at the meeting point. People started coming there.
Why Kraken?
Well, I'm from the Marine Special Forces. I like Scandinavian mythology. I read a lot, and for some reason, when everyone was discussing what our special unit would be called, not even a special unit, but a unit, I suggested the Kraken, such a mythical monster, a deity that no one could beat. Then I came up with this sign in a triangle, Kraken in a triangle. It was my idea that our unit would now be called Kraken. Everyone agreed and everything was fine. Because only Yuta and I were from the Defense Intelligence headquarters in the personnel unit, the commander of the Special Intelligence Unit, Zima, was taken from the reserve. There were other officers. That's how the unit was formed.
Tell me, when you were taking people to positions, in particular to Saltivka, as a professional and experienced officer, how did you assess their preparation then? Or there was no time for such reflections and something had to be done?
You know, based on life experience, even those people who pick up weapons for the first time can act more effectively than professionals who've been with weapons all their lives. Psychologically, they have no fear and no barriers. If you study for this all your life to become a soldier, then you know how to fight and apply this and know what to do as a professional. But if a person picks up a weapon for the first time, He does not have that psychological barrier. He goes ahead and does things that he could not imagine before. And this, it turns out, is phenomenal. Because you study for 5 years at the military academy, you train constantly. And here, inexperienced guys come, pick up weapons, and they don't understand they can die. They cannot know this because it's their first time. And they acquitted themselves very well. Very cool. Very cool. The enemy couldn't enter the city. The defence was well done here. I organised the defence with VITO. A combined ambush was set up in combat positions. Grenade launchers, machine gunners and riflemen. And in some places mines were laid. Plus, there was the 78th Battalion from the Hoops, and they acted together.
Did you really hope or believe that the result would be so victorious? It seems to me that Kharkiv was pro-Russian not only for Russia, but also for Ukraine. And considering that Kharkiv is closer to Belgorod than to Poltava, and cultural ties and family ties, and generally mentally, the Soviet Union is not yet ended in many people's minds. Did you expect to succeed? Is it just when the adrenaline kicks in and you have to act? What were your thoughts then?
As for the local population, I was impressed by the people. Maybe they were pro-Russian, but with the majority of the population of Kharkiv, so you understand, on the first and second day of the war, they were bombed by their so-called brothers. The city has now become so pro-Ukrainian and with such a pro-Ukrainian attitude. When we took up military positions in Saltivka, people came out, brought food. There was an enormous flow of volunteers. Yes, many people left, but already by the third or fourth day of the invasion, it was impossible to say that Kharkiv remained a pro-Russian city.
Has Kharkiv changed a lot since then?
Yeah, it's changed a lot. People simply couldn't understand that Russian people, who lived just half an hour away, started shelling and bombing the city. People have now entirely changed their perception and attitude towards the Russians. The Russians miscalculated their plan to capture Kharkiv. It has become such a pro-Ukrainian city. They entirely misjudged the situation. Here, the whole city stood up to protect their homes and Ukraine. In the direction of Tserkuni, a Russian convoy left at 4 in the morning. That convoy was accompanied by a police car. The Russians made a fake Ukrainian police car as if our national police were accompanying them. Our National Guard was there, and that's where the first fight started. On that side were the 92nd Brigade of the 22nd Battalion. Cars and tanks were coming, and the guys opened fire and started shooting. Here the first tank was blown up, and the battle began. The National Guard was coming from that side. They came under crossfire, they knocked out a tank, and here the Russians were stopped. We were on that side at the time, and we began to take positions.
What is it behind us?
On 24 February, there was a patrol station here. This is all that remains now. Here the battle began. The Russians started running to those buildings. The fighting was very intense. The Russians realised that they could not pass here, so their remaining forces began to retreat. Then they went to Tserkuni village.
What were your emotions, understanding in the first fight? For example, with the car accident, when the car is heading towards you, you just don't believe this is happening to you. What was happening with you on 24th? Or it was just go, go, go?
On the 24th, I was not surprised. This was not new to me. This was not my first war. I acted with a cold heart and a cold mind. There was a precise plan of action, and we acted according to the plan. There were no emotions. There could not be, because emotions interfere. You look at what is happening, assess the situation, and immediately have a plan. I'm prepared to sacrifice my life. I opted for military service to become a professional soldier. I'm prepared to die. Together with all our fighters, I make an integral contribution to the defence of our country. People like me do this because we need to free our land from the occupier.
In the middle of the combat, when you are a target and someone is aiming at you, you've seen the death of your mates. And what happens at that moment? Do you feel like a cold, focused officer who follows the algorithm? Or you feel just rage and fight for your life, revenge for your brothers? What is happening to you at that moment?
If you think like that, you become not so much a person, but instead have more of an animal instinct. You must defend yourself with a need to defeat the enemy. Hormones are released, and your sense of everything becomes so intense that you see, hear, and act better. The most important thing here is that you are not let down by pumping adrenaline, and that fear does not overwhelm you. When you see people who are overcome by fear, they freeze and can no longer do anything.
How can you stop being scared as a human being?
I too am afraid, but my fear helps me survive. I analyse the situation. If it's close fire combat, you see where the enemy is, what his position is, and where he fires from. All of this needs knowledge and experience.
I was told in a private conversation by a British soldier who went through Iraq and Afghanistan that there is nothing more exciting than hunting an enemy who is hunting you, and you get involved in that thrill of the hunt, and it becomes a driving force. Would you agree with that? Did you feel something similar?
Yes, certainly. But the most important thing here is to have a clear mind and not get carried away, because you can get so bogged down that the enemy will outplay you. You have to evaluate everything very carefully. Yes, there's excitement. You understand that the battle's set and you can attack the enemy from the right or from the left, but your life is the potential price of this game. We're not in some computer game where you can come back to life. If you were killed, you stay killed. You're no longer alive. Here you must rely on your knowledge, your experience, and your ability to fight. Just make sure you don't let adrenaline get the better of you.
Do you think it's experience?
Yes, it is experience, knowledge, and skill. Most of all, we rely on our own experience. I led the first soldiers who took up the city's defence in these positions. I drove up here and stopped. Our tank was leaving from there. Everything was exploding. There was very dense fire, so I left the car here. The residents started to come out. I ordered everyone to go to hide in the arch over there. More people were running out, because of which we were prevented from taking up our position. We started to split up. There was a fierce battle going on. Everything was exploding and burning. People were running away. Here we took our first position in the city, a permanent one. Those volunteers who joined our Kraken unit were battle-hardened here. They stood on the defensive line for 2 months. Here the Russians inflicted heavy fire damage upon us. They had helicopters, artillery, rocket launchers and fab bombs. In one building there was a fab bomb that didn't explode, and they were constantly targeting us with tanks. On that side they were trying to pass. There were advance parties trying to come through, but we had positions over there, so they couldn't pass. People were hiding in the basement under this shop. They got inside immediately when the firing started. Russians worked with their missile launchers. There were mines and shells coming at us. You can see everything here in fragments, here and there. Here, at the entrance to the basement, the local people, about 250 people, sought refuge. This was their home, their sanctuary. Amongst them were small children, the future of this community. They all had to leave, forced out by the war that had shattered their lives.
Kraken proved to be one of the most legendary regiments in Ukraine's armed forces during the first year of the invasion in February 2022. It is famous for its high morale and successful defensive and liberating operations in different frontline parts. President Zelensky himself recognized the courage and creativity of the Kraken fighters.
Я дякую бійцям підрозділу Kraken.
Many would like to join, but the selection process is very tough. Candidates undergo testing, including questionnaires and polygraph tests, but not many can pass.
Typically 120 people would join. I know from experience that after 14 days about 40 of them will have left. After that another 35 will leave, and by the end of the course there might be only 30 remaining.
What is the most difficult for you during the training?
For me?
Yes, in the training of the recruits. Is it already just in flux, given that war doesn't give a break, and for you the main thing that is moves and works as it should be? Are there any moments that personally for you are very sensitive?
When new recruits arrive, they're clearly highly motivated and they want to defend our country. I know that not all of them will be able to live to see victory. These people make the ultimate sacrifice for the defence of their country. Their names will be forever etched in our history. These soldiers are heroes. They go on attacks, they conduct surveillance, and they make a fierce impression upon the enemy. Each of them puts their life and soul into it. When one of your brother soldiers dies, of course it's tough, but you can't let that show. You know that he sacrificed his life. He chose the path of sacrifice. It's not pleasant, but you have to put up with it, and you have to carry on.
And how often do you get those among the newcomers who prove themselves in the way that in Kraken would be called real tigers?
You know, it all depends on the person. If he wants to achieve more, his motivation will drive him on. We have many such soldiers who yesterday were civilians and today are experienced advance party soldiers, experienced scouts, experienced mortarmen, experienced gunners, and many other skilled roles we have. He follows this hierarchy, he learns and he improves his skills. It's great to watch these guys.
There can't be many of them, right?
We have enough of them. We have excellent units. I'm proud that there are such guys. But these are individual people, and everybody has a different experience. Some soldiers say that we must recapture our land, after which they'll want to return to their civilian life. We want to protect our country, our city, our land. Other soldiers say that after recapturing our land, they will want to continue with their military service. They're 50-50. If the war ends tomorrow, half will go back to civilian life, and half will want to stay and continue their military service.
What about girls?
There are women in the unit, but we certainly don't let them go into combat. But we do have such women. On the first days of the war, they defended the Kharkiv region with weapons and they were in combat. When I saw them, they were wearing balaclavas. I asked some of the women, "What are you doing here?" There was combat, but the women had weapons and they were fighting.
They are fighters as well, if they were trained.
Of course, they are military personnel. This is their wish. Amongst our snipers, we certainly have some women. But mainly they're engaged in work at headquarters and in dealing with logistics.
Because they want it, or because it is too difficult to get there for assault and combat positions.
Well, you see, these are women, our future mothers. As a mother, she must give birth to a child and to raise it. Let her go on an assault? I forbid it, except for those snipers.
Do you realize that you sound like a sexist? Because woman is not only a mother, just like a man, It has million different aspects.
I understand that, but I don't want to be responsible if something happens to her.
They are adults. They do understand where they came. They did not come to the butterfly laboratory.
I understand this, but I look at the women as my daughters. Although my own daughter followed in my footsteps, she decided that year to enter a military academy. She's a military person. She finished her first year and wanted to join me in combat. You understand my feelings? Yes, many girls want to fight, but we still have enough men who are fighting and who will in the future fight. If the country runs out of men, then the women will fight. When I joined in service, I didn't ask anyone. I wanted to be a soldier. I just went to serve and did as I chose. My daughter lived here when the war started in Kharkiv. She was with me for a month. Then I sent her to stay with friends in Western Ukraine. She made this choice. She went into military training. I supported her choice and did not interfere in her life. She regularly calls saying, "Dad, I need this. Please advise me on that." At the outset, I advised her on general conduct because it was a bit hard for her to obey, subordinate and accept discipline. I told her that she had to do so-and-so. A year has now passed. She completed her first year with flying colours. Everything is perfect. She likes it. She's ready.
What troops is she in?
What do you mean?
Are there any ramifications?
General military.
A general military. Okay. Tell me, why are you VITO?
I had a different call sign, but I've been in this war since 2014, and from my other activities, the Russians picked up on it. Not to highlight the call sign here, but I love comedy films, and there's an actor, Danny DeVito. He's so cool. I just took his name.
How long ago? Since the invasion?
Since the 24th of February.
Is it the lucky one?
Yes.
Look at you. A man. Your mother's son. Your wife's husband. And a father of a student girl. There's VITO, an officer and fighter. How do you see him? Are you experienced? Can you describe yourself? What are you? Who is this VITO today? What kind of commander is he?
First and foremost, I'm an officer. I fulfill the duties the state has entrusted to me. I took an oath, and I'm faithful to it. I'm loyal to my country and to my people. But I can't judge myself.
It's not about the evaluation. It's about what drives you. What you live by. You said the story of Kraken inspired you, with its mythology, its invincibility, something great that wins and no one can overcome it.
I'm from the Naval Special Forces, a sailor. They say whatever you name the ship, that's how it will sail. That's the choice of the name of the unit. I talked with Yuta in the evening. I suggested the Kraken. There were no other proposals. My vision was of the Kraken logo within the triangle.
Why the triangle?
This is our symbol. If you look at it, you can see the meaning. What drives me forward?
Yes. What does inspire you?
Inspires me? First of all, it's my desire to win, so that we defeat this aggressor, return back to the 1991 border, take back all of our occupied lands, and share my experience with other soldiers, and I have a lot of experience to share. And to carry out the tasks set by the head of the Ukraine Defense Intelligence. The missions are exciting and creative.
Being with intelligence at this time is very interesting. The spies are very mysterious, the elite, which is very difficult to catch. You have to outwit and be creative. How do you manage? And does it work? Maybe you see it differently. This is a very romantic image inspired by films. in particular by James Bond himself.
I'll tell you this. Intelligence is primarily based upon relationships and upon trust. Today, our scouts and intelligence personnel are engaged in a slightly different way. This is not general intelligence, it's specific military intelligence. Having gathered intelligence, the intelligence groups then go on a mission where they collect information and bring this back. Then we look to see whether we have data from other sources in the area under surveillance. We make an assessment, we analyse, we develop plans, and then we carry out sabotage and further intelligence work where the enemy's stationed.
There are a lot of speculations about Kraken. Its audacity, its boldness, particularly in the development of the operations behind the front line, on the enemy territory. Tell us a little bit about it, how important it is, and what role does it play in the war that's still going on?
First of all, to successfully complete the task, we need to clearly understand the enemy's forces and their means. Scouts do this first. They go in to scout. It's technical reconnaissance. Then we use drones. Information is collected, evaluated, and analysed. Then plans are drawn up. It depends on how we plan the operation. Success is 80% in the planning and 20% in the actual conduct of the operation itself.
How valuable is this information when taking a risk and entering enemy territory? Is it worth it? Can it really change the entire preparation, approach, strategy or execution tactics?
Without information, we cannot act. We will be blind, you know.
Yes, but information from the enemy's territory is entirely different. If you launch a drone and it is shot down, it is another matter. But if a group of special forces fighters were caught or injured, it's people and their lives. Before the dam was torn down, special forces fighters constantly fought for the islands in the Kherson region. Sometimes they went out on assignment and then come back, and this control over the small islands was under the Russians, then under us. As a rule, such sorties were at night. They were wounded and someone was lost, so how valuable is this information? Is it one of the aspects that intelligence deal with?
When it is obtained from the front line, all information is valuable where we're dealing with the enemy. Without intelligence, we cannot complete the task because we're unable to assess the enemy correctly, his forces, his means, his location. When scouts go to observe, drones then give further information, and technical intelligence is the third source of information. We evaluate all of the information obtained from these three independent sources. In the assessment itself, we now have a fresh picture. Then we conduct a deep analysis and we work out permutations of various plans. Only then do we bring these plans to those units who will conduct this task in the combat zone. Then a plan is written, and one of the points of inclusion may well be a diversionary manoeuvre. Here we can outwit the enemy. War is down to creativity. There are no limits here.
As far as understood, there were many such diversionary maneuvers during the Kharkiv operation to liberate the Kharkiv region, because they advanced from here, entered from the other side, while receiving a blow here. They attacked from the third side as well.
Yes, in the counter-offensive in the Kharkiv region, which started from Balaklia, diverting manoeuvres were used, and it was possible to outwit the enemy. The enemy didn't understand what was happening when the offensive operation began, and it gave us a great chance to act quickly, to act dynamically. The enemy didn't expect this to happen. It seemed to them that they were surrounded, and they were running away whenever they saw us. They didn't even have an exit plan. They ran away along the road. We fired upon them, and they went back and forth through fields, through forests, and through rivers. It was interesting.
Пане президент, пане Місто Молодія, Харківської області, взято під контроль. Наказ виконано. Російські окупаційні війська відійшли. Спецпідрозділ головного управління розвідки Кракен. Сьогодні, 8 вересня, 16:00. Слава Україні!
Героям слава!
When you're in the process of designing and evaluating operations, it's like playing a very dangerous game, isn't it? You're constantly balancing between excitement and doubt, faith and uncertainty, as you try to predict the outcome of the operation.
Of course, such deep planning is necessary to save as many human lives as possible. We bring these plans to the General Staff. Then the commanders of the groups draw up their action plans based upon how they see it on the ground. They plan for themselves.
Please tell me, on these operations which take place on enemy territory behind the front lines, as usually the most experienced or those who want to go, taking into account all these risks, how is the selection made? Is there any selection, or how it will be? Or it just sounds the most dangerous when you enter enemy territory?
First of all, the task is passed across to intelligence. The commander of the intelligence unit determines who is to be in the group, who is to go across, and who has which task.
So everything depends on the commander?
Indeed, there are specific combat tasks that require our attention and action. These tasks encompass a range of actions that we must undertake to achieve the objectives of the mission.
Does previous experience count? For example, if someone joined the military on 24th of February, is it better if they have been fighting since 2014? Are there any points here? Or does it not matter?
We call them deep intelligence groups. They're all experienced and they're motivated and they clearly understand where they're going. This can be said to be a one-way ticket. I perform such tasks. Once I was a group commander and I was given tasks and I accomplished them all. The group clearly understand where they're going. They understand that they may not return from there. They were given the task, they gathered together and then left. Then they return.
When death is breathing down your neck, you have to find a mythological or illusory belief that you are a tiger, you're a warrior, you're Kraken, you are invincible. Because if you realize that you are an ordinary person and you can die, a completely different one appears emotional condition. It also has its benefits.
I'll tell you this, we will never meet death because when there is us, there is no death. When there is death, we are not there. Every serviceman who goes into battle knows that he is Kraken. We have a chevron of our Kraken. It is given after a soldier has been in battles and earned this chevron. No one has the right to wear this chevron just like that. At the beginning of March, our positions were already here. I'm trying to remember. March 7 or 8, here a group of Russian special forces approached from the Kutuzovka district. The Russian Guard unit, mostly Chechens and Akhmatovs, were in this group. Fight broke out here. Our boys were in position there. The 92nd Brigade was also there. There was a fight, and the battle ended. And the next day we decided to tidy up, to clean up. We split into two groups. One group went to the air defence base to clean up, where the Russians were spotted, and I started cleaning up from here. We drove up here, and there were dead enemy here. I got out of the car and came up here. I didn't know whether live enemy were here or not. I went out alone. Two other guys went out here. I signalled them to take the flank, and I went to inspect the place. I had a thermal imager on my weapon. I looked into the sight and I saw a thermal image. The enemy took hold of the handle of a fridge and he saw a reflection of my thermal image. I started to go in from the left, and I saw that the enemy stood up, saw me, and aimed a machine gun at me. I quickly took a few steps, quickly turned to the left of him, and there was a door. He must have realised that I was hiding behind a column, and he was waiting for me to leave this column to then shoot me. When I saw him right here, I fired and hit him, injuring him, and only then did I go inside to look at it to clean up the petrol station. This was the first prisoner taken. He was sent to the hospital later. I don't know his fate. He probably went into the prisoner exchange scheme. Here everything was covered in corpses. There were corpses there too. This group was almost destroyed. Our other men had already come here because they had heard the shooting. We took away the enemy corpses and started checking their documents. But none had documents apart from just one man lying behind the petrol station. He was probably an officer. He didn't have any documents, he only had 200,000 rubles and an iPad. From documents on his iPad, we later realised that he was indeed an officer. Then we buried them all here. A couple of months later, we were looking for one of them that had to be exchanged. He was dug up from the burial ground. We found him, and his identity was confirmed. We were given clear photos. He was the son of some important official from Chechnya. I remember that this one dead man was exchanged for many of our living soldiers.
Some soldiers who were wounded and are then being treated tell what they usually keep silent about, that they often wake up from the smell of blood, from the smell of a body that is already rotting. And when you came here, do you remember anything? Were there any similar moments then? Apart from the fact that they were targeting you, they wanted to kill you. You could also lie down here, maybe a smell of something else?
The smell of war, it is distinctive. It is present everywhere. There is the smell of burnt munitions, of exploding shells, of burnt premises, and of mined houses. The smell of war, it is everywhere. There'd be no smell if you killed your enemy only a couple of hours ago. But when a corpse has lain for a long time, it emits a sweetish, unpleasant smell. It is there.
The blood smells of metal.
Yes, yes. Everything is burnt and destroyed, and there is an ever-present distinctive smoke from explosions and from ammunition. The same smell is everywhere, you might say.
Tell me more about the moment with the captured prisoner. There was no danger from him. What is included here? Human rage for the fact that he and his colleagues came and brought so much grief? Or does the mind of a military man still include, there is a plan of action with point 1, 2, 3?
First of all, we take a military approach, but we must not forget about international humanitarian law, the treatment of prisoners. Yes, this is our enemy. This is an aggressor, but we can carry out an interrogation and at the outset quickly get information from the prisoner. There is a moment when the prisoner realises that he is in captivity, and out of fear, he will tell everything. Whilst we had many prisoners, none were abused. They were treated normally. They were in normal conditions and were fed 3 times a day. They had full bathroom facilities. We had such a case towards the Luhansk region. We took a GRU Russian intelligence officer prisoner, and I then interviewed him. During the interview, he was caught out by the fact that he had a phone with him. It was the phone that completely betrayed him. He was a trained officer, a senior lieutenant. In the opening moments of the interrogation, when you put a question to the prisoner, he will be so scared that he will give you valuable information just to stay alive. In our unit, in Kraken, there has not been a single case during the entire war when we had a prisoner who was killed or injured in our custody. Those prisoners who arrived with injuries were quickly provided with medical assistance and were treated. In one case, a prisoner's leg was saved. The medics had at first wanted to amputate it, but then it was treated, and he was later exchanged. He was also an officer. All prisoners are treated in accordance with the law. We understand that whilst this is the enemy, the occupier, you have to remain an officer, to be dispassionate, but don't be inhuman like your enemy.
But for the soldier, even if we take away the context of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, this is an additional hassle, especially if he's also wounded or if he has a grenade, you're trying to put a tourniquet on him and he's on you with a grenade. That is when the battle is still going on and the purge didn't take place. And it is not clear who and where is hiding, where he will jump out. Prisoners are a problem. How to deal with this?
If we act like them, if we are inhuman, then how are we any different? We show that we are not like them. We are not Nazis. We are not fascists. We are normal people who protect our land from them. The fact is that their propaganda works. They come brainwashed. Then when they are captured and we ask, "Do you know where you are?" and the prisoner says, "No," we tell them that we're the Kraken, and the prisoner starts to shake. He thinks that he'll now be cut into pieces and eaten. But this does not happen. Instead, he's given food 3 times a day. He eats normally. There is a bathroom. He takes a shower. He has normal conditions, and the earlier impression completely changes in his head. When we later exchange them, they say that they could not have imagined that they would be treated like this in captivity. When prisoners from the Wagner mercenary group were captured, they told us about the conditions in which they had lived, then said that by comparison with Wagner, their conditions with Kraken were like being on holiday or being at a health resort. They had not expected that the conditions of their stay with us would be like this. This is how we change their perceptions and their attitudes.
It is very often said about the Ahmad battalion that they are such TikTok troops. When talking about them with foreign officers, they say that they are useless on the battlefield because they come for money. And when there is a fighting for the land, for independence, for freedom, nothing can compare to the motivation of the Ukrainian army. Therefore, against this background, they are absolutely ridiculous. Do you agree with this?
During the first year of the war, at that petrol station we've been to, we had our only combat encounter with these TikTok troops. They're not really on the front line anywhere. We understand how they operate. The prisoners of war told us about them. They're like siege troops, troops behind the Russian front line who prevent a Russian retreat. We had combat clashes with regular troops, mobilized with the so-called Luhansk People's Republic, the Donetsk People's Republic, and with Wagner. As to the regular military, they clearly act according to a military plan, and we know how they operate. Those mobilized from the so-called Luhansk People's Republic, the Donetsk People's Republic, if they had no combat experience and did not fight in 2014, 2015, 2016 and until 2022, then we know their approach. Those who have been conducting military operations against us since 2014, we also understand their approach. We know how they operate. They are better prepared. All of them are morally and psychologically broken. I haven't met a single one who's really motivated. Ideologically, they're brainwashed. When they are with us, they see that everything they were told is untrue, but then their perceptions change. I'd like to point out that amongst the Russian military, these 3 groups are capable. The most audacious of Wagner. I mean the experienced soldiers of Wagner, not the convicts and not those who were conscripted. And I also mean those who are ex-servicemen. They showed results. It was difficult to fight with them. Amongst the Russian military, they know how to fight. I can also single out certain special forces groups that can really fight, and some tank units. They will win mostly due to their artillery systems. At the beginning of the war, they had a hardware advantage of several dozen-fold. but they still couldn't go and take the city. We began to drive them away, and they began to lose their equipment. They started running away because they know that they are invaders. They came to our land to take possession of our territory, to take all of our natural resources. They are the invaders, and that is how they will always be. From here, the enemy inflicted fire damage on the city of Kharkiv. What made this operation stand out? The fact that the unit already had some experience. We made the first attack in a column of vehicles with the support of armoured vehicles and tanks. We approached the outskirts of the area and we began to use our firepower. We entered into battle. We approached the church here and took up a defence, and we made headquarters in the church. Why here? Because only in here is there a decent basement. Then we dispersed into groups around the village, and we began clearing the village.
Is it true that the head of defense intelligence participated in this operation, and how did it happen?
The commander came to this operation because it was an operation to push back the enemy. Our commander, Kirilo Alexievich, was here at this operation. He was coming from the other side. He entered the village with us. You know his story, how he became the head of defense intelligence. He was an intelligence officer, and he was on various operations, and he still desperately wants to participate in such operations. When he arrives, he spurs us on. The boss has arrived. We need a result, and everyone works together for that result.
Do you think our freedom is worth all these losses that we have already occurred and that will occur?
We are very lucky. We are very lucky that we have such a president as Zelensky.
Why?
Zelensky showed the whole world how the president of Ukraine should not be dismissed. Despite the predictions made by the Russians that he would run away, he did not run away. He stayed with the people. We can see from his actions that he comes to the front line, just like Budanov. He comes to the front line to see for himself. He certainly doesn't just sit back in Poltava in some military unit. He arrives at advanced positions. He appreciates that he may die, but he comes to his soldiers. He comes to see the people. He is the only such president in the world. He battles away on the global stage so as to see us regain our freedom. He demonstrates and proves to everyone what is happening here in Ukraine. He didn't run away from his country. He didn't run away from Kiev. To us soldiers, it means a lot. This road goes to Belgorod in the Russian Federation, 12 kilometers to the border. This is the high dominant position. Our task was to reach here, to establish a foothold here, and to take this settlement. After the success in Ruska, Lozova, we concentrated on progressing our small counter-offensive. The first trophies were taken from the enemy here. This is heavy equipment. The scouts captured a tank. This is a tank that had been on parade in Red Square.
How do you know?
By number. It had a license plate. Then, when we looked at old footage of the Red Square military parade, we found the tank had been in the parade. It's a T-80 BV, a new model, a new tank, captured by our scouts. It was our man we call Physicist and his guys who captured the tank. They carried out a shock assault operation and took the tank.
Here, where we are standing right now. In fact, the same distance to the border with Russia and to Kharkiv. We are now in the suburbs of Kharkiv. Am I understanding correctly?
It's about 20 kilometers to Kharkiv and about 12 kilometers to the border.
What are your emotions? How dangerous it is? Are you used to this? After all, there is such proximity to the enemy and his lair.
We know that in this cloudy weather, no one can see us from above. Of course, there is some danger, and our positions are further over there. But if artillery shelling starts, and we know how to act, we will act that way. The enemy's not here now, so nothing is threatening us. You get used to everything, and you also get used to war. Very heavy fighting was going on here. We occupied the village. The group commanders kept track of the firearms, the artillery, and the anti-aircraft missiles that were landing upon us. When you review the record of what was landing, you will see that the group commander was Rachok. I forgot to say, and I want to highlight it, Rachok is a real guy, a hero, a scout. When we entered Ruska Lozova in a convoy, there was a mine barrier. There were about 30 mines, and with his bare hands, he went and removed these mines. He clearly understood what could have happened. He was the only one who did it, and he made it possible for our convoy to enter Ruska Lozova. Rachok kept a journal, and in 1 hour there are 150 landings upon us, and this just from rocket launchers. For example, marks the time, 12:01, arrival. 12:01, arrival again. Then the rocket launchers again. We calculated that at Pytomnyk village alone, the enemy had released about 1,500 shells in a day. We held our position here until July. Then we were relocated to areas in the Donetsk and the Luhansk regions. It was very difficult here. Upon our relocation, we handed the position over to our territorial defence unit.
Honestly, I can't believe we're so close.
We can drive closer. When we arrived here, we went through the gardens of these people, across to the school, because the enemy had settled there. First, we inflicted fire damage with 2 artillery units, but a whole convoy of our cars was under artillery fire. Our convoy stretched for 1 kilometre, but there was only 1 armed vehicle in the convoy, a trophy taken from the enemy, a BDM-6 Tiger. This had been captured when entering the village. And that's all we had, pickup trucks and personal cars. To the outsider, it was maybe a little ridiculous, our convoy of car upon car. We got into the village, took our positions, and then we began to advance. I'll tell you a secret. There was no general planning here. Why didn't we have a plan? Well, we received the job at 10 in the evening and had to begin by 4 in the morning. We started at 4 and already by 5 we'd entered the village.
And why such urgency? Is it to prevent the potential leaks of information? Was it necessary to cover for others?
Because we had to work in sync with the 92nd Brigade. The 92nd Brigade stormed Malorohan. We had to cut off possible enemy escape routes 3 times. Later in the battle, when our attack began, some Russians were blocked there. Other Russians were blocked there. The groups operating below took the first prisoners. They were Malysha's group and Batnek's group. Over by those trees, the enemy used helicopters. We saw helicopters coming out of there, on the horizon, see? 5 helicopters, one by one, spread out and firing at both us and the village of Vilkhivka. And their fighter jets were involved. The enemy fired fab bombs at us, but they overshot and didn't fall upon us. They had miscalculated. Fabs fell further there, but no one was hurt. Here, I will tell you that our men felt that everything was falling upon us. From rifle combat, artillery, missile launchers, helicopters, aircraft, the enemy threw everything at us.
How did you survive? Where did you hide?
By constant movement. We were changing positions all the time. From this street to that, from here to there, so we ran all over Vilkhivka.
As far as I understand, the equipment of the military was not the same as it is today.
Here we had that trophy SDF Tiger, so it went in front of the column. Small arms and RPG, and that's it. 1 anti-tank gun and 2 missiles.
And what is now coming from the partners, and how much does it change the situation? How much does it change the whole dynamic and possibilities?
Today, our arms are completely sufficient.
Russians were over there?
Some special forces were over here. They were not ordinary military. Why? They acted very competently. They were so competent that I carefully considered their approach. There were not many of them here, something approaching a platoon. They spread over the floors of the school and moved around the classroom. They had different equipment, K-12 weapons, RPGs, not ordinary military. The bulletproof vests were of a higher class than those for ordinary soldiers. We also later captured them here, and the battle was going on in this school. It lasted 8 hours. We didn't have the weapons we needed. Ammunition was very limited. Our guys were very careful with these supplies because they knew that there were no more cartridges. At the beginning of the war, it was difficult to fight. It was limited. In the evening, 2 enemy tanks and 2 armoured personnel carriers crossed the bridge. There was infantry on them. They were in black uniforms. They went to the aid of their special forces. They came along the road and stood behind us and just started shooting at us. We were stuck in that street. We couldn't get out. Yuta then contacted the commander of the 92nd Brigade and requested fire support. He provided the coordinates of the location of the tanks. It was very close to us. You could say that Yuta called for fire upon us. He asked me, and I just said, go for it. We had to somehow withdraw our men. This was the only way. If the road was blocked, we had to make a quick decision. I gave the coordinates. Our artillery began to work, and the tanks moved to the other side of Vilkhivka. It was already getting dark, and we decided to leave the village. We had little ammunition remaining. We left this village, then the 92nd Brigade entered the village and completely took control.
And what has helped if special forces were sitting here?
This is what I told you about. The boys don't have this psychological barrier. They don't understand what fear is. When they were here that day, then they understood what it is. But here was real hell. The Russians threw everything at us. 2 streets were completely destroyed there. There are now no houses or anything left. I remember we were running over and someone shouted, "Sniper!" And I stood like that. The door was open, I got out, stood here, and it was bang! The door was hid. And one of our men, Viking, he pulled me, saying that it was a sniper, and I said, "Wait, I'll look now." The sniper hit the door right next to me. Viking pulled me back, saying, "Quiet." You know, everything was flying around. You just couldn't understand where it was flying from. A woman comes out of her house and brings pancakes. She says, "Eat, guys." I tell her, "Please hide in the basement." And she says, "I made pancakes for you here." I gave it to the boys because no one had eaten anything all day, and she had baked us pancakes.
Do you realize that you could not have returned from this trip? It is actually your place of the second birth, isn't it?
Look, none of us knows what awaits us, now, this evening, tomorrow. It means that the sniper had been so poorly prepared that he didn't get me, and from such a short distance, less than 100 meters. During that day, you could say that you were reborn 50 or 100 times. There was such a density of fire. To be honest, at the time I thought, and both Yuta and I said, that we could all die here. The firepower was simply unreal. Yes, we lost some guys here, but no, not many. But we did lose some.
Do you believe that you have a mission in life?
Yes, of course. I have thought about it. Once I had a teacher. The subject was religious studies, a very interesting subject. He said, yes, I did have a mission. We were once angels, and we served in the army of the Lord God. Then the Lord created the earth, and he sent us to earth to do his bidding. God took off our wings and gave us our epaulets. So now we are angels, and we carry out this mission. Probably the mission is to protect our country at the moment. I've been doing it since 2014. And to fulfill the task set by Budanov.
Thank you for watching it. You made it to the end. I hope you enjoyed it. Please share your thoughts with me in the comments and I will read each of them. I just would like to remind you that this episode was filmed in June 2023 and I was in Kharkiv. I was meeting Colonel VITO and at that time he was one of the commanders Kraken. By now he left regiment Kraken, he's not with regiment anymore, but he keeps defending Ukraine on the front line with his team and he's still with Defense Intelligence. So again, thank you for watching, please don't forget, like, share, subscribe.